She said it was just a party, but my 9-year-old daughter couldn't even say her own name. I found out at the hospital, both twins had whiskey in their systems. Not sips. Enough to cause brain damage. Denise blamed some neighborhood dare, but neighbors told me the truth. She'd been throwing parties while I was deployed. Loud, late, reckless. My kids were drugged so she could dance, and then I found the receipts. My combat pay funded her club. Nights in Vegas. She thought I was still overseas. What she didn't know? I had a brother-in-arms named Brian, and a service record built on strategy. She took my kids' health. I'm taking back everything else, and once the judge sees what she tried to sell behind my back, she'll wish I never came home. My name is Mark Callahan, and I'm 45 years old. After 20 years of military service, I live in a half-unpacked house in Cedar Grove, counting the days until my twins come home. Base life meant marking time through care packages and school photos, while my wife Denise managed our home front with our children, Sarah and Michael. The cafeteria's burnt coffee and jet fuel smell became more familiar than my own bedroom, while calls home crackled like distant radios. My friend Brian, a fellow soldier turned private investigator, always said a trained eye could spot weakness in any defense. Denise's midnight calls grew strained, her laughs too sharp when discussing weekend plans and my promotions. I'd promised the twins a backyard renovation after my final deployment, my shot at giving them stability. But something in Denise's voice, that brittle edge during our last satellite chat, stuck with me like embedded shrapnel. But let me start from the beginning. I'd imagined my homecoming 1,000 times during that final flight. 2 backpacks bouncing down the front steps, maybe a welcome home dad banner hanging crooked because the twins insisted on doing it themselves. Funny how the mind builds these perfect little scenes during those long nights overseas. Instead, I got fluorescent lights and antiseptic hulls. You know that distinct hospital smell? The one that's like bleach mixed with yesterday's soup? That hit me first. Then came the migraine-inducing flicker of those overhead lights, stabbing at my jet-lagged brain like Morse code. "Mr. Callahan?" A doctor in wrinkled scrubs approached, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Could we speak privately?" I followed him to a consultation room, my boots squeaking against the polished floor. The sound reminded me of those late-night patrols when every noise felt like a warning. "Your children's lab results showed concerning levels of alcohol metabolites," he said, sliding some papers across the desk. "Specifically, whiskey." My hands went numb. There must be some mistake. I wish there was. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that careful tone doctors use when they're about to change your life forever. "The exposure has resulted in some cognitive damage. We're still assessing the full extent, but there will likely be lasting effects on their learning abilities." Just then, Denise burst in. Mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint. "Mark, thank God you're here!" She threw her arms around me, but I stayed stiff as a flagpole. "It was an accident," she kept saying, over and over, like a broken record trying to skip past a scratch. I untangled myself from her embrace. "Tell me what happened." 20 years of military training helped me keep my voice steady. But inside, my blood was boiling hotter than those Afghan summers. "Some neighborhood kids," she started, then paused to dab at her eyes. "They were playing truth or dare." I listened as she spun her tale, but something wasn't adding up. Those 2 a.m. calls I'd gotten overseas, the ones where she'd sound distant, distracted, they started making a different kind of sense now. "How many bottles were involved?" I asked, watching her face. Just the one from the cabinet." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "The kids must have—" An overhead speaker crackled with some medical code, making her jump. A nurse slid another clipboard across the counter for signatures, but I couldn't take my eyes off Denise. "Who poured it?" I asked, my voice dropping to that quiet place that scared even my toughest recruits. "Who actually poured the whiskey?" The hallway lights flickered again, casting strange shadows across her face as she turned away. That was all the answer I needed. Brian used to say silence speaks louder than 1,000-word confession. Standing there, watching my wife's shoulders hunch forward, I finally understood what he meant. After that hospital bombshell, I needed answers. Real ones. Not the sanitized version Denise was selling. You know how intel gathering works, right? Start with the ground truth and work your way up. I walked our street that evening, letting my boots hit the asphalt like I was back on patrol. Funny how combat habits stick with you. I found myself automatically noting escape routes and cover positions before remembering this was just suburban America. But maybe that tactical mindset wasn't entirely out of place. Mrs. Henderson was watering her petunias when I passed. "Mark, when did you get back?" Her garden hose dipped, creating a small rainbow. "We've been concerned." "About?" I kept my voice casual, the way you do when interviewing witnesses. She glanced at our house, then lowered her voice. The music, mostly. Sometimes past midnight. And all those cars dropping people off at odd hours. She twisted the hose nozzle nervously. We tried calling, but? Well, Denise said you knew about the gatherings, that they were helping her cope. 3 more neighbors shared similar stories. Each one started with an apology and ended with Denise using my deployment as a shield against their concerns. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more. Back home, I did a sweep of the kitchen. The cabinet above the fridge, where I'd kept my small collection of spirits, was practically empty. 2 bottles of Jack, the maker's mark from my promotion ceremony, even that special bottle of scotch from my old commanding officer, all gone. The recycling bin told its own story. Sticky glasses hastily rinsed, wine bottles buried under paper towels, and that sharp bleach smell? Too new, too strong, like someone trying to erase evidence. I found Denise in the living room rehearsing her story. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at water stains that looked like continents on the ceiling. The AC unit rattled and wheezed like it was on life support, keeping time with my racing thoughts. You ever have one of those moments where everything you thought you knew just crumbles? That was me. Right there in room 114 of the Budget Rest Inn. The doctor's words kept playing in my head. Significant cognitive impact, lasting effects, blood alcohol levels. Each phrase hit harder than the last. I rubbed my eyes until spots danced behind my eyelids, but it didn't change anything. The twins, my kids. How do you process something like that happening to your own flesh and blood? You know what really got to me? Those little toothbrush holders by the sink. 2 of them, white plastic, probably hadn't been used in months, but they reminded me of our bathroom back home, where the twins had matching Superman and Wonder Woman holders. Stupid detail to focus on, maybe, but it nearly broke me. I'd spent 20 years handling crisis situations, but this one had me ready to wave the white flag. The thought of dragging my kids through a custody battle, making them relive everything in front of strangers in some sterile courtroom. It felt like I'd be hurting them all over again. Maybe it would be better to just... My phone was in my hand before I finished that thought. Brian's number stared back at me. We'd been through hell together overseas, and he'd never steered me wrong. But asking for help? That's harder than most people think. The phone rang twice. Mark? Brian's voice came through clear and steady, like always. Been expecting your call. I'm losing it here, brother. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. The whole thing's foobar. Take a breath, he said. You're thinking like a father. Need you thinking like a soldier right now. That pulled me up short. He was right. I was letting emotion cloud my judgment. Brian had transitioned into private investigation work after his discharge, and his next words proved why he was good at it. Here's what we're going to do, he said. All business now. First rule, document everything, but don't engage. No confrontations, no accusations. We're gathering intel, not starting firefights. You copy? Copy that. The familiar rhythm of tactical planning started to center me. Good. I'm sending you a checklist. Bank statements going back 3 years. Social media activity logs. Every rideshare receipt. Phone records. Especially during your deployment windows. Text message backups if you can access them. I grabbed the hotel notepad, started writing. The AC unit sputtered, but its rhythm felt less like a countdown now and more like a steady march. What about the neighbors? We'll get there. But right now we need paper trails. Digital footprints. The kind of evidence that holds up in court. Not just hearsay. My phone buzzed. Brian's secure link coming through. The checklist was comprehensive, methodical. This was something I could work with, something concrete instead of the chaos swirling in my head. I reached into my go bag and pulled out the twins' photo from last Christmas. They were building a snowman, cheeks red from cold, smiling those gap-toothed grins. I propped it against the motel alarm clock, then set the wake-up for 05:30. One more thing, Brian said. Remember when we were in that mess outside Kandahar? How'd we get through that? Step by step. No shortcuts. Exactly. This is no different. You've got Overwatch on this one. I'm your ground support. The neon vacancy sign outside my window flickered, casting weird shadows across the room. But for the first time since I'd walked into that hospital, I felt my training kick in. Gather intel. Establish patterns. Build the case. My phone pinged again with Brian's detailed checklist. I took one long breath. Let it out slow. Denise wanted to play games with our kids' future? Fine. But I wasn't going to fight dirty. I was going to fight smart. The soldier in me knew. Good intel beats raw emotion every single time. Ever spread out 3 years of someone's financial life across a motel room floor? Let me tell you, it's like reading a diary written in numbers. Brian and I had been at it for hours, armed with highlighters that made the place look like a college study session gone wrong. "Check this," Brian said, tapping his pen against a bank statement. "See that recurring transfer? Every month, like clockwork, right after your direct deposit hits." I leaned in, squinting at the line he'd marked in yellow. The destination account had initials that made my stomach clench. DMW. Denise Marie Wilson. Her maiden name. "You ever authorize these transfers?" Brian asked, though we both knew the answer. Never even knew about the account. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the strain of staring at tiny numbers. Remember those old military requisition forms, how every penny had to be accounted for? This was worse. Way worse. Brian started marking dates with different colored stickies, creating a rainbow timeline across the motel wall. "Look at the withdrawal patterns. Thursday nights mostly. During school weeks. You know that moment when puzzle pieces start clicking together, but you hate the picture they're making? That's what it felt like as we traced where my paychecks had really been going. The Marquee Club. Someplace called Elite Bottles. Nordstrom. Saks. Weekend trips to Vegas when I thought she was visiting her sister. "Hold up," I said, pointing to a particularly expensive night. "This one. It's the same date as—" Brian nodded grimly. "The hospital visit. Large withdrawal at 9:47 p.m. The rage built up in my chest like a pressure cooker. But Brian must have seen it in my face. "Stay frosty," he warned. "Numbers don't lie, but they also don't get emotional. We need you thinking clear here." He was right. I'd seen too many guys lose their cases by losing their cool. Taking a deep breath, I watched Brian work his magic on the whiteboard he'd brought in. Red arrows flowing from my military deposits into that secret account, then spreading out like a web to all these luxury spots. The visual hit harder than any spreadsheet could. "Document everything," Brian reminded me, handing me his laptop. "Screenshot the online records, but we'll need certified copies from the banks too. Everything needs a proper chain of custody, just like evidence overseas." I started typing up an exhibit index, keeping the language simple and direct. No accusations, just facts. Regular transfers of child support funds to undisclosed personal account. Pattern of recreational spending during children's school nights. The lawyer talk felt strange in my mouth. But Brian insisted we had to play by courthouse rules. "Remember," he said, clicking receipts into a 3-ring binder, "when they cross-examine you about these records, they're going to try to get under your skin, make you look unstable." I know, and I did. I'd seen Denise's lawyer type before. Sharks who'd twist a man's service record into a liability. "I'll keep it mechanical. Just the numbers." Brian checked his watch. "It's almost midnight, we should—" His phone buzzed, cutting him off. Well, look what just landed." He turned his screen toward me. A rideshare receipt from the night of the hospital visit, time-stamped just before that big withdrawal. Pickup location, our house. Drop-off, the Marquee Club. That receipt felt like the last puzzle piece dropping into place. The same club where she'd been spending my combat pay while I was dodging mortars in Kabul. The same night our kids ended up in the ER. I watched Brian add it to the binder, that solid black binder that now held enough ammunition to blow Denise's custody case sky high. But you want to know the weird part? I didn't feel triumphant. Just tired, and sad, and ready to make sure justice worked the way it was supposed to. "What do you think, Brian? We got enough?" He closed the binder with a click that echoed in the quiet room. "More than enough. Question is, you ready for what comes next?" Next morning, Brian showed up with 2 cups of gas station coffee and a look that meant business. My stomach was too knotted to want breakfast, but I took the coffee anyway. The bitter taste matched my mood. "Ready to dive into the digital stuff?" he asked, setting up his laptop and what looked like a small black box with cables. "As ready as I'll ever be." I watched him connect Denise's old phone back up to his gear. She'd left it syncing to our home computer. Sloppy operational security, as we used to say in the service. But then again, she probably never thought anyone would look. You ever watch one of those crime shows where they enhance grainy security footage? This was nothing like that. Brian's software was clean, clinical. Just metadata and message threads laid out in neat columns. He started typing in search terms. Kids, drink, sleep, various combinations that made my coffee taste even worse. "Hold up," Brian said, his cursor freezing on the screen. "Look at this thread." The messages popped up, time-stamped from those long nights when I was overseas. Denise chatting with someone saved as party queen, about how hard it was to go out with kids at home. Then the smoking gun, clear as day. Got a trick that works perfect. Slip some whiskey in their juice and they sleep right through. Can party all night without paying sitter $dollars lol. My hands started shaking. Had to set the coffee down before I crushed the cup. The thread went on. More messages about getting the kids buzzed so she could hit clubs, brag about bottle service, plan weekend trips. All those nights I'd called home and gotten no answer. All those times the twins had sounded groggy on our video calls. Mark! Brian's voice cut through the rage fog. Stay with me here. We need to preserve this exactly as is. He walked me through forwarding the thread, showing me how to keep all the technical bits, metadata. He called it intact. Had to label everything just so, like maintaining chain of custody for evidence back in my service days. One wrong move and it might not hold up in court. Perfect, Brian said when we finished. This is what we needed. But we hadn't even finished our coffee when my phone buzzed. Email from my lawyer. Denise's team had filed new papers with the court. Have you ever had someone take the very thing you're most proud of and try to turn it into a weapon? 20+ years of serving my country with honor, and now Denise's lawyers were painting me as some kind of unstable threat. PTSD, they claimed. Unfit for custody. Too volatile to be trusted with children. It's a desperate move, my lawyer said when I called. But we need to take it seriously. These allegations can stick in people's minds even after they're disproven. I dug through my files while Brian worked the phone. Found my last military psych evaluation, the one that praised my exceptional stability under high-pressure situations and consistent application of nonviolent conflict resolution skills. 20 years of commendations for keeping cool when things got hot. Brian was already building our counterattack, putting together a witness list. My old commanding officer. The base family counselor who'd worked with us during deployments. Teachers who remembered me video calling into parent conferences from halfway around the world. Documentation beats accusation, Brian reminded me, tapping away at his laptop. We're building a wall of evidence here. Your service record shows stability, not liability. The calendar on his screen started filling up with dates. Preliminary hearing, discovery deadline, character witness depositions. Each one a milestone in this strange new kind of warfare. I stood up to stretch, feeling the weight of too many hours in that motel chair. Out in the hallway, the service elevator dinged, and for a moment, the sound took me back to those hospital corridors where this whole mess started. Funny how a simple sound can bring it all rushing back. You know what gets me? I said, staring at those damning text messages still glowing on the screen. All those nights I was up wondering if my kids were safe from mortars. They weren't even safe in their own kitchen. Brian nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then let's make damn sure they're safe from now on. The next morning, my lawyer's conference room felt like a war room. You know those moments before a mission when everything gets real quiet and focused? That's what this was. Brian had laid out our evidence in 3 neat piles across the mahogany table, each one like a loaded magazine ready to fire. Financial records first, Brian said, tapping the thickest stack. Shows pattern and intent. The judge needs to see how systematic this was. My lawyer nodded, flipping through bank statements we'd highlighted. These transfers tell a clear story. Child support going straight to party expenses while the kids ate TV dinners. The room smelled of fresh coffee and printer toner. Funny how those details stick with you when you're preparing for battle. I remembered similar scents from mission briefings, but this time the stakes felt even higher. After we established the money trail, Brian continued, we hit them with the text messages. Let them sink in before anyone mentions PTSD. My lawyer played judge, firing questions while I practiced responding. Had to get the timing right. Pause, breathe, answer clear and steady. No matter what Denise's team threw at me, I needed to keep my voice level as a carpenter's bubble. Remember, my lawyer coached, when you describe finding out about the whiskey, stick to facts. Let your military bearing work for you. The judge needs to see stability, not anger. Brian spread out my service record next. Commendations, psych evaluations, letters from commanding officers. 20 years of proof that I could handle pressure without cracking. Each document got its own colored tab, making a rainbow of rebuttals to Denise's claims. If they push the PTSD angle, Brian said, we don't dodge it. We face it head-on with these evaluations. Show how the military taught you to manage stress, not explode from it. The afternoon stretched into evening as we rehearsed. Every question, every possible curveball they might throw. I practiced making eye contact with where the judge would sit, keeping my shoulders squared but not rigid. Had to thread the needle between strength and aggression. Your Honor, I repeated for maybe the 20th time. I've spent my career protecting others. Now I'm here to protect my children. By the time we finished, The parking lot was empty except for our cars. The streetlights cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the case files riding shotgun in my passenger seat looked like silent guardians. I tried to picture tomorrow, walking past Denise in the courthouse corridor, not letting her see me flinch. The same way I'd trained myself to walk past IEDs without showing fear. Different kind of explosive. Same steady nerves needed. Get some real sleep tonight, Brian said, checking his watch. Meet here at 0600 for final prep. Want to be at the courthouse by 0900. Back at the motel, I set 2 alarms. Learned that habit in basic training. Pulled out my wallet and found the photo I wanted. The one of the twins at their last birthday. Their smiles still innocent, before all this mess. I taped it carefully to the inside cover of our main exhibit binder. The courthouse looked different in the dark, looming against the night sky like some kind of medieval fortress. Standing there in that empty parking lot, I thought about all the battles that building had seen. Marriages ended, fortunes lost, lives changed by whatever words got spoken inside those walls. Tomorrow that building's clock would run our show, setting the pace for objections, responses, and whatever justice looked like in civilian clothes. My phone buzzed. A text from Brian reminding me to review my notes one last time before bed. I locked the car, double-checked the files were secure. The courthouse windows stared back at me, dark and patient, while somewhere across town my kids were probably getting ready for bed. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. My first alarm chirped at 0445, but I was already awake, staring at the motel ceiling. You know that pre-mission feeling, where your body's so tense even sleep gives up? Yeah, it was one of those mornings. I splashed cold water on my face and straightened my tie for the 10th time. The mirror showed a face I'd practiced. Calm, steady, like I was heading to a routine briefing instead of a custody battle that would decide everything. The parking lot was still dark when I pulled in at 5:52. Brian's car was already there, steam rising from his travel mug as he waited. Some habits never die. Military guys are always early to being early. Final equipment check, he said, popping his trunk. Had to smile at how he treated court exhibits like mission gear. We spread everything out under the security light, making sure every page was in place. These go on top, Brian said, placing my commendations in the lead position. Distinguished Service Medal, Bronze Star, Unit Citations. Shows the judge who you really are before they try painting you as unstable. Inside the conference room, our lawyer was arranging talking points on yellow legal pads. We open with dedication, he said. 20 years serving your country while sending every spare dollar home. Makes it clear those absences were sacrifice, not abandonment. You ever notice how courthouses have their own smell? Like floor polish mixed with paper and anxiety. The hallway was still quiet when we arrived. Just a few early clerks shuffling files. I caught my reflection in the polished marble wall. Shoulders back, chin level, just like standing inspection. Denise showed up right at 9, designer handbag competing with her legal pad for space. She had that practiced frown I remembered from base housing meetings. The one that said, "I'm the victim here." Our eyes met for half a second before she looked away. But I kept my face neutral. No point giving her legal team anything to work with. The bailiff's voice bounced off the wood panels. All rise. The judge entered. An older woman with reading glasses and a no-nonsense expression that reminded me of my first drill sergeant. Case number 2023 CV 4891, the clerk announced. Callahan versus Callahan, hearing on temporary orders and emergency motions. After setting ground rules, the judge had me sworn in. Brian gave me a single nod as I took the stand, keeping that file folder close like it held classified intel. Denise's lawyer went straight for the PTSD angle, trying to make routine post-deployment screenings sound like red flags. Isn't it true that combat exposure can lead to unpredictable responses? The way he paused was calculated, letting that word unpredictable hang in the air. I kept my answers short and direct, just like we'd practiced. No, sir. My evaluations show consistent stability. Let the documents do the heavy lifting. That was Brian's strategy. The opposing counsel tried a different angle. During your absences, Mrs. Callahan was solely responsible for the children's daily care, correct? I was serving our country, I replied evenly, and sending 90% of my pay home for their care. The judge was flipping through a new packet of documents, her frown deepening with each page. She adjusted her glasses, then looked directly at Denise. Mrs. Callahan, she said, cutting off the lawyer's next question. Can you explain this deed listing? The room got so quiet you could hear the wall clock ticking. It appears you've initiated a sale of the marital home without Mr. Callahan's knowledge or consent. Denise shifted in her chair, while her lawyer quickly flipped through papers. The judge wasn't waiting. "This filing is dated last week," she continued, holding up a document. "Are you aware that attempting to sell jointly owned property without all owners' consent constitutes fraud?" The room went still. Even the court reporter's fingers froze over her keyboard. Brian's hand tightened on that file folder, and I suddenly understood why he'd kept it so close. He'd been waiting for exactly this moment. After a 15-minute recess that felt like 15 hours, I was back on the stand. My collar felt tight, but I kept my posture straight. You learn in the service that how you carry yourself matters as much as what you say. Brian moved with that quiet efficiency I remembered from our deployment days, distributing bound copies of bank records to the clerk, counsel, and judge. Each packet had those little colored tabs marking the important parts, the kind of attention to detail that wins battles. "Your Honor," our lawyer began, "I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit C-12, showing transfers from the joint account to a secondary account under the defendant's maiden name." The judge nodded, and I watched her eyes track across the pages. Know that feeling, when you're absolutely certain you've got solid intel? That's how it felt watching her review those records. "Mr. Callahan," our lawyer continued, "can you identify these recurring transfers?" "Yes, sir. Those were my direct deposits, combat pay, and housing allowances sent home for family support." He methodically walked through each transaction, building the timeline like laying down breadcrumbs. Every withdrawal, every merchant code told its own story. Weekend bar tabs during school nights, resort charges while the twins were with a neighbor, bottle service receipts time-stamped at 2 a.m. "And this particular series of transactions," he highlighted a section, "corresponds to the night your children were hospitalized?" "That's correct." My voice stayed level, just like we'd practiced. 3 bar charges, followed by a rideshare pickup at 1:47 a.m. The courtroom projector hummed to "Life," throwing blue light across the wood paneling. There they were, Denise's texts blown up larger than life. The one that hit hardest was right at the top. "Got the twins buzzed so they'd sleep while I partied. Mom hack of the year, LOL. You know what's funny? Not funny haha, but funny strange? How something that makes your blood boil can look so ordinary in court exhibit format. Just black text on white background, with timestamps and metadata lined up neat as rifle rounds." "Your Honor," our lawyer said, "we've preserved the complete digital chain of custody." "Mr. Sullivan?" Brian stepped forward with that calm competence that made him legendary in our unit. "Yes, sir. All messages were extracted using Forensic XT software, maintaining original metadata. I can confirm timestamps, device IDs, and transmission records." Classic Brian. Thorough without showing off. The projector clicked through more slides. Rideshare receipts matching the text timestamps, credit card charges from bars she'd mentioned in the messages, GPS data putting her phone at those locations. "Objection!" Denise's lawyer finally found his voice. "These records weren't properly authenticated during discovery." The judge peered over her glasses. "Overruled. The evidence was disclosed in supplemental filings last week. With proper certification, continue." I kept my eyes forward, focused on the seal behind the judge's bench. Could feel Denise staring holes in the side of my head. But I'd learned long ago not to take enemy bait. "The exhibits are admitted," the judge announced, making notes on her pad. "We'll break for lunch and reconvene at 1:30 for closing arguments." She looked up, adding, "And we'll address the attempted property sale immediately after." The afternoon sun was fighting through the blinds, laying stripes across the counsel table like prison bars. The big clock on the wall showed 1:57. I'd sat through firefights that felt shorter than this morning. "All rise," the bailiff called out. As everyone stood, the air conditioning kicked in with a blast of cold air that reminded me of desert nights. Time to step into the hallway and wait for the next phase. I squared my shoulders and moved toward the door, letting muscle memory from all those military ceremonies keep my steps measured and sure. 20 years of service had taught me that patience and procedure win more battles than emotion ever could. Back in that courtroom after lunch, everything felt different. You know that calm that settles in right before you execute a mission? When all the planning's done and you're just waiting for the go signal? That's where I was, watching our lawyer stand. "Your Honor," he began, "this case isn't about military service or absence. It's about choices and consequences." He lifted one of our exhibits. Mr. Callahan chose to serve his country while supporting his family. Every paycheck, every phone call, every care package shows a father's commitment. I kept my breathing steady, just like Brian had coached me. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way we'd done before night ops. The evidence speaks clearly, our lawyer continued. Bank records show systematic diversion of child support funds. Text messages document intentional endangerment. And now, we have an unauthorized attempt to sell the family home. These aren't mistakes. They're calculated decisions that put 2 children at risk. Brian sat beside me. That thick folder of military commendations ready on the table made me think of all those times he'd had my 6 in the field. Some things don't change, just the battlefield does. My client's service record, our lawyer gestured toward the commendations, shows 2 decades of steady judgment and de-escalation in high-stress situations. His unit commanders consistently praise his calm leadership and community-building skills. He held up one particular letter. This citation specifically mentions his work with local families in crisis zones. Hardly the profile of someone unstable or dangerous. Denise's lawyer stood next, straightening his tie. Your Honor, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Combat veterans often struggle with PTSD. And, counsel, the judge interrupted, do you have any clinical evidence of PTSD in this case? Well, no, Your Honor, but do you have any documented incidents of concerning behavior? Not as such, but the judge's pen tapped the bench 3 times. Sharp, deliberate clicks that cut through his stammering. So you're asking this court to rely on stereotypes rather than evidence? You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. I'd seen that same look on commanding officers' faces when someone tried selling them a bad intel report. Let's move on to this real estate matter, the judge said, pulling out the deed packet. Clerk, please read the relevant dates. The clerk stood, adjusting her glasses. Property listing agreement signed March 15th. Buyer inquiry processed March 28th. Initial sale contract dated April 3rd. She paused. All documents preceded the petitioner's return date of April 20th. I watched Denise staring holes into the table surface, her fingers working the edge of a legal pad. Funny how people show their tells when the truth catches up. Mrs. Callahan, the judge said, these documents bear your signature, but Mr. Callahan's appears to be different from his other court filings. Denise wouldn't look up. Her lawyer shifted in his chair like his suit had suddenly gotten too tight. Counsel approached the bench. They moved forward as white noise filled the room. I could see the judge's expression. That same look my CO had worn when he discovered someone falsifying supply requisitions. Some things aren't tolerated in any profession. The whispered conference seemed to stretch forever. Brian's hand rested near those commendation folders, ready if needed, but something in the judge's face told me we were past that point. Finally, they stepped back. The judge adjusted her microphone. Given the complexity of these issues and the serious nature of potential fraud, I'm setting this matter for final rulings tomorrow at 9 a.m. Counsel should be prepared to address criminal referrals regarding the attempted property sale. The gallery buzzed with whispers as the bailiff called, "All rise!" Walking out with Brian toward the parking deck, the sunset painted long shadows across the concrete. Neither of us spoke. We'd been in enough campaigns to know you don't celebrate until the final order's signed. I've sat through plenty of morning briefings, but none quite like this. Brian and I arrived at 08:55, early enough to claim our usual spots, but late enough to avoid small talk in the hallway. The courtroom's morning light filtered through Venetian blinds, laying stripes across the well-worn carpet like prison bars. Ever notice how time moves differently when you're waiting for something big? Those 5 minutes before 9 felt longer than some of my desert patrols. Right at 9, the bailiff's "All rise" brought us to our feet. The judge entered carrying what looked like half a law library and notepads and folders. My throat went dry at the sight. In my experience, thick stacks of notes usually meant somebody was about to have a very bad day. "Be seated," she said, arranging her materials with the precision of a field surgeon laying out instruments. "This court has reviewed extensive evidence regarding custody, financial matters, and recently discovered issues concerning the family residence." I kept my hands flat on the table, controlling my breathing just like Brian had drilled into me. The gallery behind us was packed. Seems word had gotten around that something big was coming down. "Let's begin with the established facts," the judge continued, lifting the first page. "Medical evidence confirms the presence of whiskey in both children's systems, resulting in documented cognitive impacts." She paused, looking directly at Denise. "The court finds the respondent's neighborhood dare explanation wholly unconvincing." A small sound escaped Denise, something between a gasp and a whimper. I didn't turn to look. "Furthermore," the judge went on, "text messages admitted into evidence show the respondent explicitly discussing, and I quote, getting the kids buzzed so they'd sleep while I partied." Bank records demonstrate systematic diversion of child support funds to finance these activities. The air in the courtroom felt thinner with each word. I'd been in pressure drop situations before, but this was different. This was watching justice build like a slow-rolling thunderhead. However, the judge said, shuffling papers, what deeply concerns this court is the attempted sale of the family residence. She held up a document that I recognized as the deed packet. Investigation reveals that Mrs. Callahan initiated a sale process while Mr. Callahan was still deployed, misrepresenting sole ownership to a prospective buyer. The gallery's whispers sounded like wind through dry grass. Brian slid a small notepad toward me. In his precise handwriting, hold steady. The documentation is unambiguous, the judge continued. A listing agreement signed March 15th, buyer inquiry processed March 28th, and initial sale contract dated April 3rd. All preceding Mr. Callahan's April 20th return date. She looked up, her expression carved from granite. This court takes a very dim view of attempts to dispose of marital property through misrepresentation. Denise's attorney stood up, his tie slightly askew. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client regarding these matters. 2 minutes denied, counsel, the judge replied without hesitation. These issues have been before the court for adequate review. I heard Denise shift in her chair behind me. The bailiff adjusted his stance slightly, the way security personnel do when they sense tension building. While this court intends to address custody determinations separately from potential fraud referrals, the judge said, it's impossible to ignore how these actions reflect on credibility across all issues. She gathered several documents into a single folder. We'll take a 15-minute administrative pause, then reconvene for final custody rulings. The bailiff called all rise again as the judge exited. The moment the door closed behind her, the gallery erupted in hushed conversations. I stood, my legs steadier than I'd expected. Brian gave me a slight nod, the same one he used to give me when we'd successfully cleared a building. As we stepped into the hallway, I heard Denise's voice crack behind the closing courtroom door, saying something to her lawyer that sounded like, you promised. Some promises, I'd learned, don't hold up under the weight of truth. The 15 minutes crawled by like a wounded minute hand. When we filed back in, even the air felt different. Heavier, like those moments before artillery changes everything. Be seated, the judge said, and I noticed she'd trimmed her stack down to 3 precise folders. In my experience, that usually meant decisions were locked and loaded. This court is prepared to render final orders regarding custody, financial matters, and referrals. You ever notice how the biggest moments of your life tend to arrive with this strange underwater feeling? Like you're watching everything through blast-resistant glass? Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, she continued, this court finds overwhelming cause to award full legal and physical custody to the petitioner, Mark Callahan. She paused, looking directly at me. The court notes Mr. Callahan's demonstrated stability, consistent financial support, and immediate protective response upon discovery of harm to the minor children. My chest tightened. Brian's hand touched my shoulder. Just for a second, the way we used to steady each other before breach operations. Regarding Denise Callahan's access to the minor children, the judge continued, this court orders supervised visitation only, to be conducted at the Family Services Center. Duration and frequency will be reviewed after completion of mandatory parenting and substance abuse programs. I heard Denise make a sound behind me. Something between a gasp and a sob. Her lawyer was writing furiously on his legal pad, but his shoulders had that defeated slope I'd seen too many times in the field. On financial matters, the judge said, lifting the second folder, this court orders restitution in the amount of $47,622, representing diverted child support funds plus associated costs. She looked at Denise's counsel. Payment schedule to be established within 30 days. The gallery buzzed like a disturbed hive. The judge tapped her gavel once, restoring silence. Finally, regarding the attempted property sale, she said, opening the last folder. This court is referring the matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential real estate fraud. All documentation will be transmitted by close of business today. Remember those training exercises where you had to keep your bearing while chaos erupted around you? This felt like that. Only the stakes were real, and the ammunition was life-changing. That concludes these proceedings, the judge said. Clerk will prepare the orders for signature. We're adjourned. The next hour blurred into signatures and file stamps. I watched my name appear on custody papers that felt impossibly light for their weight in my life. Around us, the hallway filled with people tapping phones, their whispers spreading like powder burns. Did you hear about the mother who poisoned her kids? Funny how reputation can collapse faster than buildings under fire. By the time we reached the parking lot, Denise's name was already trending in local circles, and not in ways any parent would want. The drive home felt surreal. We'd gotten the house back as part of the temporary orders once the sale attempt surfaced, but I hadn't spent much time there yet. Boxes still waited in corners, patient for calmer days. I unlocked the door, and the twins burst past me like they'd been spring-loaded. They made a beeline for their favorite bin of Legos, the one thing I'd made sure to unpack first. Within minutes, they had bricks scattered across the living room floor in that familiar chaos that meant a fort was under construction. Brian stood in the doorway, watching them with that slight smile he got when an operation went exactly to plan. "Need anything else, brother?" I shook my head. "You've done more than enough." He nodded once, then stepped back into the evening without another word. Some of our best conversations had always been the silent ones. The twins worked on their fort with the focus only kids can manage, carefully placing each brick like it was the most important piece in the world. When they set the final block on top, a little red flag piece that came from who knows which set, I felt something settle in my chest. Standing there, watching them build something new in a space that was finally safe, I realized what all those years of service had really taught me. Honor at home matters more than medals abroad.